and welcome back to my YouTube channel. On today's class, I'll be making this Basque Corset Jumpsuit with Keyhole Neckline. So if it's your first time viewing my channel, please like, share and subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the notification button to get new updates from my channel. First thing I'm going to do is to mark my shoulder to bust, my shoulder to under bust and my shoulder to waistline. Next, I'm going to take my tape and I'll mark my shoulder divided by 2. After marking my shoulder divided by 2, I'm going to be adding ½ inch because I'll be attaching sleeve to the dress. From there, I'll go ahead and go down by 1 inch for my shoulder slant. After marking my shoulder slant, I'm going to mark out my neckline. So I'm just using the standard neckline, which is 3 by 3 inches. So I want my neckline to be a bit lower than what we have at the thumbnail. If you want yours to be exactly what we have there, you can just mark the neckline. So after that, I'll connect it back to that 1 inch shoulder slant. So at my bust line, I'm going to mark exactly my shoulder measurement divided by 2 plus the half, and I'm going to draw a straight line. After drawing a straight line, the next thing I'll do is to measure my chest line from there. And my chest line is 7 inches. To get yourself chest line is your bust divided by 6 plus 1.5 inch. After doing that, I'm going to draw a straight line connecting for my chest line. To draw your armhole curve, you're going to divide what you have at that point and you're going to go in by half. Then you're going to place your French curve and connect, drawing your armhole. But if you don't have a French curve, it's okay. You can always do a freehand sketch. After marking that, the next thing you're going to do is to mark your bust pan, which is your nipple to nipple divided by 2. So I'm going to mark it at my bust, my under bust and my waistline. And I'm going to take my tape and I will connect, drawing a straight line, connecting all the dots that I have marked. I'll go ahead and I'll measure what I have remaining at the shoulder after I marked my neckline. And I'm going to divide it by 2. So whatever I have, I'm going to place it back and I'm going to mark at the center. So from that point, I'm just going to connect it back to the bust line. So after doing that, the next step I'm going to take is to mark my dart intake. At my waistline, I'm going to be marking a dart intake of 1 inch at both sides. At the under bust, I'm going to be marking a dart intake of 1 inch at both sides. So after marking that, I'll take my ruler and I'm going to connect, drawing a straight line at both sides. After connecting my lines with my ruler, I'll go ahead and take a marker and I'll outline what I have marked so far. At my chest line, I'm going to be going down by ½ inch and I'll be coming in by ½ inch also. So after marking that, I'll place my tape and I'll find the distance from my bust to my under bust. After doing that, I'm going to mark the distance round. So I won't be making use of this, but it will be serving as a guide while marking or drafting my cup side. So I'll just make a dot round the bust and the under bust area, creating a circle. So the line might be faint because I'm just making a dot round the bust and under bust area to serve as a guide. I went ahead to outline that ½ inch I came down and came in with so that it will be visible. So from there, I placed my French curve and I'm going to draw my cup. So this is optional. If you don't have a French curve, you can also make use of a freehand sketch. Next, I'm going to be marking my bust circumference divided by 4 because I want to determine where my cup from the side will start from. Next, I'll be extending my lines at my chest line. That's my bust circumference. I'm going to take it to my chest line. From my chest line, I'll place my tape and I'm going to mark 1.5 inch. So you can as well mark 1 inch if you want your cup to be lower.
And from that point, I'm going to be marking my bust tightening. I'll be marking 1 inch at both sides for my bust tightening, or my dart intake at that point. So the reason why you're marking this is to avoid gaping at that point. I'm going to place my rule and I will connect it back to my bust point. After connecting it at that side, I'm also going to connect it for the other side of my cup. Then I'm going to take my French curve and I'm going to place it from my bust point to my under bust, and I'm going to make a curve. So it's not compulsory to use a French curve. You can also use a freehand sketch if you don't have a French curve. And I'm also going to place my French curve. From that point, I stopped at the bust and I will connect it to the chest line, forming my cup at that area. I'm going to take my tape and I'll mark my bust circumference. From my bust circumference, I'm going to be coming in from 1 inch. At that 1 inch, I'll go down by ½ inch. After going in by ½ inch, I'm going to draw it connecting my new chest line. So from there, I'll take my French curve and I'm going to place and draw a cup. So for those that don't have a French curve, you can also make use of a freehand sketch at this point. Connecting from your new chest line to your under bust. And if you're making use of a freehand sketch, you have to be careful not to give it a different shape altogether. Next, I'll place my French curve from that line and I'm going to connect it down to my chest line area. After drawing out that part, you're going to place your French curve and you're going to connect it down to your under bust. So after drawing this, my cup is ready. So this is what I have at this point. Then I'm going to use my marker and I'm going to outline all my lines so that it will be very visible for you to see. So please, at this point, if you find this video very interesting and educative, don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, like, share, and don't forget to turn on your notification button to get updates when I upload a new video on my channel. After outlining my markings, the next thing I'm going to do is to insert my body circumference. So at my bust, I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4, and I'm going to be marking my 2 inches sewing allowance. After marking my 2 inches sewing allowance, I'm going to mark the dart I have in between. Then I'm going to replace my dart intake. Coming down to my under bust, I'm going to mark my under bust circumference divided by 4. After marking my under bust circumference, I'm going to measure the dart intake I have here and I'm going to mark. After marking it, I'll be adding 2 inches sewing allowance to my pattern. At my waistline, I'm going to insert my waist circumference divided by 4. After marking that, I'll go ahead and mark the dart intake I took at both sides. Then I'm going to be adding back 2 inches sewing allowance. Next, I'll be connecting my lines from my bust to my under bust and my waistline. After connecting, I'll go ahead and I'll use my marker and I'm going to outline what I have at that point. I'm going to blend my chest line to my bust line. So at this point, it is optional. You can get ahead and leave it straight, or you just blend it down to your bust line. To tighten your yoke area to avoid gaping, you're going to extend that dart you have at the bust to the mark you have at your shoulder. With this way, you're going to avoid gaping at that point. So you're either going to cut off the dart or you're going to blend it in this way. So for me, I prefer blending it in. It works for me better this way. So from there, the next thing we're going to do is to determine our keyhole neckline. So from my neckline, I'm just going to come down by 3 inches, and from there I'm going to draw my keyhole neckline. So you can make use of your French curve if you want to, but I'm going to make use of a freehand sketch at this point. I'm just going to draw it. After drawing it, I'll go ahead and I'll outline it with a marker so that it will be visible. After outlining it, I'm also going to outline other important parts of my pattern. So the next thing after doing this is to cut out my pattern. So at this point, you really need to pay attention to know the part to cut. And I'll go ahead and I'll also label my cup as 1 and 2 so that I won't misplace one for the other one. Then I'll go ahead and I'll continue cutting out my pattern. So going to the down part, I'm just going to cut out the dart areas first, and I'm going to merge my cup together and I'll sellotape it before cutting out my cup area. So it's not compulsory you do it this way. You can as well cut out your cup before doing this. After sellotaping it together, I'm going to add a pattern paper below my pattern that I've already drafted. So with this, you're going to be attaching your basque area. If you notice, when we were cutting the dress, I didn't add the basque area. So this is another way of doing this to avoid getting confused at the dart area, or if the back is not meeting at some point. So this is like the easiest method to do that. I'll go ahead and I'll place my tape at my waist length, and I'm just going to mark 4 inches for my back length. So I'm going to take my marker and I'm going to draw out my line from my waist, and I'm going to connect it down to my basque. So with this, the basque part is very ready. Then I'll go ahead and I'm going to cut out this particular pattern. So at the upper part of my pattern, which is my yoke area, I'm going to blend in the darts that I marked this way. So the reason why I'm doing this is to avoid gaping at the upper part of your dress, because we marked 2 inches that out of the upper part of the corset part, and you're going to do that also, and then you're going to blend in. So after blending, you will notice that the corset part and the yoke area will be matching at this point. So I'm just going to cut out that little pieces that I have at that point. So this is what I have at this part for my yoke. I'm going to take my tape and I will take bits down to avoid this shifting. Afterwards, I'm going to cut out my cup, and my front pattern is ready at this point. After my front pattern is ready, we'll be moving over to the back pattern. So going to the back pattern, I've already marked out my basic measurements, all my measurements: my shoulder to bust, my shoulder to under bust, my shoulder to waistline. I marked 2 inches for my zipper allowance, and I marked my chest line just like we did in the front. So for my zipper point, my zipper part, I'm going to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2, which is my bust circumference. After marking, I'm going to connect with a straight line, and after connecting with a straight line, at my waistline, I'm going to mark a dart intake of 1 inch at both sides. After marking a dart intake of ½ inch at both sides, I'm going to connect it, drawing my darts. After drawing my darts, I'm going to mark my body circumference. So coming from my zipper line, I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4, plus 2 inches allowance. Then at my under bust, I'm going to mark my under bust circumference divided by 4 plus 2 inches allowance, and I'm going to measure the dart intake I have at that point, and I'm also going to add it going down to my waistline, and I'm going to mark my waist circumference for my zipper point. I'm going to mark my waist circumference divided by 4 plus 2 inches allowance, and I'm going to measure my dart intake, and I'll also mark. I will place my rule and I'll connect from my underbust to waistline, and I'll go ahead and connect it back to my bust line. After connecting it to my bust line, I'm going to extend my chest line to my bust area. Before cutting out my pattern, I'm going to get rid of puff at the zipper area. So at the down part of my pattern, I'm going to mark 1/2 inch, and I'm going to connect it to the end of the zipper part. With this, I've gotten rid of the puff or the bulginess at the back of the dress. Then I'll go ahead and cut my pattern. So after cutting my pattern, my back pattern is ready. From there, we'll be moving to the down part of the pattern, which is the trouser part. For my trouser pattern, I'm going to be drafting it directly on my fabric. So the trouser length I'm working with is 39 inches plus 2 inches allowance for folding or turn up allowance. So to fold your trouser, you're going to fold with your laps divided by 2 plus 2 inches allowance. So I'm going to place my tape, and here will serve as my waistline. From there, I'm going to measure 8 inches, which will serve as my hip line. After marking my hip line, I'm going to mark my crotch depth, which puts me here. So from this point at the top, I'm going to measure 3 inches in width. So that 3 inches mark I made on top, I'm going to connect it to my crotch depth. I'll place my ruler and I'll connect my line, the 3 inches mark and my crotch depth. So I'm going to extend the line out my crotch to my fabric. So I'll be using that as my crotch length. So I'll go ahead and extend that line I have at my crotch. That's where you'll be inserting your lap circumference. So if you don't want your trouser to be too fitted, at your crotch line, you're just going to go down by 1 inch where you'll be marking your lap circumference. So I'll go to the upper part, which is my waist, and I'm going to insert my waist circumference divided by 4, and I'll be adding 1 inch allowance because trouser does not require much allowance. Coming down to that 8 inches I marked for my hip, I'm going to insert my hip circumference divided by 4 plus 1 inch allowance. Like I said, trouser does not make use of so many allowance. 1 inch is okay. So at my crotch, I'll go ahead and I'll place my mark there, and I'll measure my lap divided by 2 plus 1 inch allowance. So I'm just going to mark at that point. So I'm just going to connect my lines from my waist to my hip and to the crotch point. So I'm just going to measure 1 inch upwards, and I'm going to connect, drawing a curve at that point. The next thing I'm going to do is to place my tape, and I'm going to find my trouser half length. So my trouser half length is the knee point. So I'm just going to measure from my waist to my knee what I have, and I'm going to outline the line there. So at my trouser half length, I'm going to be going in by 1.5 inch at that point. Then from there, I'm going to be connecting it to my crotch point, from my trouser half length to my crotch. After connecting it, I'll be moving down to the down part of my trouser. So at the down part of my trouser, I'll be measuring 2 inches. I'll be going in by 2 inches. So after measuring that, I'm just going to draw my line, connect it from my trouser half length down to my trouser full length. At my trouser half length, which is my knee, I'm going to measure my knee round. So whatever I have there, I'll be marking it there. So my knee round is 19 inches. So I'll mark 19 divided by 2 plus 1 inch allowance. Going down to the down part of my trouser, which is free, I'm going to be using 22 inches. 22 inches divided by 2, I'll add 1 inch allowance. I'll go ahead and I'll mark it at that point. The next thing is to connect from my trouser half length down to my trouser full length. So with this, our trouser pattern is ready and we'll be moving over to the back part of the trouser. But before doing that, I'll go ahead and I'll cut out my trouser pattern for the front. And while cutting, make sure you cut exactly what you have at your pattern. So please, at this point, if you find this tutorial very interesting and educative, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also turn on the notification button to get new updates for my channel. And for my returning subscribers, thank you for always watching and viewing my channel. I really much appreciate your effort towards my channel. Going over to the back part of my pattern, what I'm going to do is to place my front pattern on a fabric, and I'm going to be marking 2 inches at the crotch part. So the reason why we are marking these 2 inches is for sitting allowance at the back, because the back is not as flat as the front. So you can also use 2.5 inches or more. So going down, I'll just mark 2 inches at the front part of my trouser. So I'm going to mark it from my crotch to the down part of my trouser measurement. After marking that, my trouser pattern is ready for the back, and the next thing I'll be doing is to cut out the pattern. So with that, we'll be moving to the joining of the dress. I placed my pattern and I cut out. So at the upper part, I added ½ inch for joining the cup. And I'm making use of a crepe material, and I also cut out my lining for this particular pattern. So opening it up, this is what I have. So this is what my pattern looks like. So you can go ahead and cut yours into 2 and join it back, but I prefer doing mine this way. It is easier. So I'm going to take an Ankara and I will be creating a design at this point. So you can pass your boning to it, but I won't be passing a boning to mine. I'm just going to use it for a design purpose. So for my cup, I added ½ inch round. So I cut out my Ankara, I cut out my wadding, and I cut out my gum stay. So going over to the upper part of this, I just added ½ inch round, and this is my back bodice. I just cut out exactly. So I forgot to add ½ inch at the shoulder for joining allowance. Please also add ½ inch for your own pattern for joining at the shoulder part. And I also cut out lining for my back pattern. So these are all the pieces I'll be working with. For my back pattern, I'm just going to place my lining, and I'm going to sew at this my neckline. Then I won't sew at my armhole. I'll sew at these 2 parts. Then for my cup area, I'll go ahead and I'm going to join my cups. I've gone ahead and I've attached my cup. I added gum stay, and this part I added wadding. This is for the main fabric. So for my main fabric, I cut out this Ankara piece. I'll be creating a design
with it on this part. I'll just make a little design. I'm not going to attach boning, it's just for design sake. So also I've done the turn up and I've done the darts for this.
Sorry, I forgot to show you when I was joining my cup, so it skipped my mind. So I've gone ahead and I've sewed this strip. So like I said, you can go ahead and attach your sewable boning, but I won't be attaching boning. The next thing you're going to do is to sew your cup. So to sew your cup, for much ease, you're just going to pin it round before sewing. So I'll be pinning it round this way. You'll be pinning it to attach to your cup. So if you notice your cup is bigger than what you have, you're just going to notch small at your main fabric. After notching it, you're just going to go back and pin your cup. At that point, you notice that your cup will fit into what you have. So this is more like a sewing trick or sewing hack for attaching your cup to the body of your corset. So I'll continue pinning my cup round till I'm done pinning. So I'm done pinning my cup and my cup is ready at this point. So this is what I have, and I'll also do this for the other side of the cup, and I'm going to also pin for my lining, and I'll go ahead and sew. So I've gone ahead and I've attached my cup for my main fabric and my lining piece. So this is what I have, and I also unpinned my yoke part. So for my yoke, I also doubled the net area. So I'll be stitching this part, the neckline, and then the next part I'll be stitching is the part that touches the cup. From that joining, I'm going to start stitching it there, and I'm going to stop at the other point that touches the net. So the other part of the yoke, I won't be sewing it. So after stitching it, I'm going to be trimming off the excess I have at the lower part, close to the sewing or the seam line. After trimming out the sewing allowance at this point, you're going to also trim the sewing allowance at the neckline. Please, like I said, just trim off close to your sewing allowance. Trim off close to your sewing or seam line. After trimming it off, I'm just going to remove the pin used in holding it down. After removing the pin, the next thing I'm going to do is to flip it open to the right side. So this is what I have after I'm done flipping it open. Then I'll go ahead and I will iron it. After ironing it, the next thing I'm going to do is to join my pattern. So I'll make sure the joining at both the cup and the main fabric meets. Then I'm going to pin from that point. I'm going to pin down to the center and to where the other cup meets the other lining. After pinning it this way, I'm just going to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew to that point. So after joining at that point, this is what I have, and I'll go ahead and I'll flip it open to the other side to show you what it looks like. Then from there, the next thing I'm going to do is to be attaching my yoke to this part. To attach it, I'm going to flip my pattern open this way, and I'm going to place my yoke to my main fabric first, and I'm going to pin. After pinning the yoke with the main fabric, you're also going to pin down your lining with the yoke also. So you're going to pin it from that point that you joined down to the armhole or chest line area. So after pinning it, this is what you're going to have. So you're also going to pin the other parts of the yoke this way, and you're going to go to the sewing machine and you're going to stitch it. After stitching it down at the sewing machine this way, you're going to notch it round so that it will be very relaxed at that point. After notching, I'll flip it open this way, and this is what I have at this point. It's looking very neat and relaxed. The next thing I'll do is to flip it open this way. So I'm trying to join the sides. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to pin the side from the chest line down to the waistline, and I'm going to stitch with 1/2 inch. So after joining, this is what I have for the front and back, and it is looking very neat. Moving over to my trouser pattern. For the back pattern, I'm going to spread it open this way, and I'm going to place the back part of my trouser, and I'm going to join. But before joining, I'm going to fold it into 2, and I'm going to be creating a dart of 3 inches for my back pattern. So after sewing my dart in, I'm going to be joining my trouser to the upper part of the dress, and I'm going to be doing the same thing for the other side of the trouser also. Then I'll go ahead and attach my zip, and I'm going to stitch the back. Moving over to the front part of my trouser, I'm going to place the pattern I have this way. So I'm going to be joining from that part. I'll be joining with 1 inch at that part. So I'm going to mark 1 inch. On getting to the curvy part, I'm going to go down by 1/2, and I'm going to slant it to the tip. So I'll go to the sewing machine and I'll sew that. So for the down part of my trouser, I'll be folding it or turning it up. For the front, I'll be joining the upper part of the dress to the trouser part. So first thing I'll do is to find the midpoint of the basque, and at the waistline, I'll make sure it's aligning. So what I'll do next is to find the middle of my trouser. Then I'll go down by 4 inches, and then remember we added 4 inches for our basque. So I'll make sure it's meeting at that point. After that, I'm just going to trace out what I have coming from the waist to that midpoint, and then from the midpoint down to the waistline. After tracing it out, this is what I have, and I'll go ahead and I'll cut out that part, tracing the line I made at that point. So after cutting out, this is what I have, and I'll go over to the machine and I'm going to join it from that notched part. So this is the back part of my pattern. I've gone ahead, I stitched the down part, and I'm going to insert zipper. Afterwards, I'll go ahead and I'll join the front part of the shoulder to the back part of the shoulder. So after joining it, this is what I have. So my pattern is ready for joining. So I went ahead and I cut off my sleeve. So I have a video on how to cut a sleeve, and I also cut out this anchor for the lower part, and I'll go ahead and attach my sleeve to my dress. So the next step is to join my trouser, my jumpsuit. So at the lower part of my cup, that is my underbust. So I'm going to place my tape there, marking my underbust, and I'm going to mark my waist. After marking my waist, the next thing I'm going to do is to insert my measurements. So after that, I'll place my tape on top, and I'm going to mark my shoulder to bust point. So that part being my underbust, the part at the chest line becomes my bust point. So at this part, I'm going to place my bust circumference, and I'm going to mark. Coming down to my underbust, I'm going to insert my underbust circumference at this point. So down to my waistline, I'm going to insert my waist circumference and I'm going to mark. Sorry, I wasn't explaining how I marked my body circumference. I'll be doing that in another video because this video is getting too long. So at the lower part, which is my trouser part, I'll be marking 1 inch at both sides. So I'll be marking the 1 inch down. So while marking it down, getting to my hip area, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to slightly avoid the hip area just to avoid having air at that spot. After doing that, I'll go down and I'll continue marking my 1 inch, and I will mark the 1 inch to the down part of this jumpsuit or trouser. After marking it down, the next thing I'm going to take is my measurement for the inner part. I'll place my tape at my waistline and I'm going to mark my trouser half length. At my trouser half length, I'm going to insert my knee circumference divided by 2. After dividing it by 2, I'm just going to mark it. Now you're not going to mark with any allowance, you're just going to mark exactly your trouser half length or knee round. So from there, I'll be moving down to the lower part of the trouser. The down part, I'll be marking the circumference divided by 2 and I'm going to mark. The next thing I'm going to do is to connect from my knee to my trouser down part. So at coming to this part, what you're going to do is you're going to slant with ½ inch to your trouser half length, or if you don't want, you can go ahead and place your lap circumference divided by 2 and mark. So whatever I do here, and I'm going to do it to the other part of the trouser. So after this, I'll go over to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch and show you my final results. I'm also going to attach my sleeve. I'm also going to sew down my sleeve. So after doing this, I'll bring it back and I'll show you what I have. So with this, we have come to the end of today's tutorial and this is my final result. Please like, share and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification button to get new updates from my channel, and also leave your comment at the comment section.